Lost my chain of thought. I am aiming to speak to the people for a minute. Let me speak to the naysayers to reparation. Let me speak to the naysayers to reparations for the slave descendants, which is a government issue. Let me speak to the naysayers and the white and I'm say so. I'm white and I say so. And let me speak to the brothers out there who are naysayers and people who are boule, who have bought into a social illusion of financial exchange and economic slavery, who have bought into a social illusion. Let me speak to you real quick. And don't change the channel, because I got some words for you. I got some nuggets for you. Slavery is transparent information. It's an institution that lasted for a very long time in our society. And not only in our society. Slavery is a very transparent information. This is something that we don't want to have to report on. However, this is the way in which we were shaped today throughout the foundation and the ingenuity and the system of slavery. It was laid down. This country was laid down through the foundation. We laid the foundation of this country through slavery. Okay? So my ancestors happened to be slaves. Okay? So we so-called in freedom in a physical form, right? So let me speak to you about these people that don't understand the financial exchange and economic slavery. You don't get to tell me that I'm speaking out of turn because you don't want to hear about slavery. That lets me know that you have the IQ of a 5-year-old. We're not talking realistic when you do that. You cannot point me to fanaticism. That's fanaticism when I start talking about, it's just only going to brew up something. Listen, you cannot force me to live outside of America while it exists around me. This is my country. I'm anchored in the history of it, through the wars of the history of it. I was looked upon and classified as a slave once upon a time in this country, where I had to eat the failure of being a descendant of slavery. Hearing the stories around the celebrations, Black History Month, repeating poem sites, singing black hymns, hearing our ancestors talk about the experience of slavery, rocking back and forth in chairs, knowing the history. My family was forced to build their homes around an Indian graveyard. They donated land to the property. They built the first black school called McCall High. Before it was integrated in 1974, my mother had to get the old books that white kids had in order to learn. She had to go to the hardship of being told something. They had to suffer and see people be abused because they didn't have their full rent. So the white man would come and have sex with whoever he wanted to in the house that were females, so this man could have their rent. This is Mississippi stories. This ain't nothing I'm making up. This is my life as a descendant of slavery. Whether I have a successful endeavor or not, you don't get to tell me I don't know my history when you never sat in my living room. I don't care we're supposed to get along. I don't care that I'm intellectual and that I'm professional and that I love all people. This is not about that. This is about you and your non-intelligence when it comes down to the atmosphere of history. And people trying to appease the powers that be. You're trying to appease white people, because you know that their ancestors were slave traders and they have what you call white guilt. And necessarily all of them shouldn't have it, because what happens is now you have white people that were slave owners or have inheritances that came from slavery, all the way back from slavery. And this is a blood sacrifice. That's blood money that hasn't been distributed properly. These people are wealthy. And people usually, when they're wealthy, they really don't care about the other person because they don't have to feel the pain of eating the failure of being non-wealth. But this is also a government issue. Now, if you were intelligent, you would understand. If you look strategically, you would understand this is a government issue. The United States sanctions slavery. So the country itself owes us, and every taxpayer in it, because they benefit from the institution of slavery. We laid the railroads, we laid the foundation, we brought the wealth, okay? This is just what it is. Now, what I'm starting to believe is that black people, or a lot of people, are jealous of the slave descendants, because the slave descendants have that claim. We have that justice claim. We have that right to say that we have been the strong arms and the bones and the guts of this country that made it sprout muscle and flesh. The words of Yvette Carnell. That's what I believe that is going on now. And let me be clear with you. Let me be perfectly clear. It's not about whether I like you. I love all people. I'm a very social person. But I'm also very intellectual about what I know, and I'm very astute about what I get my teeth in. I'm very studious about the information that I obtain. And I'm a history buff, and I haven't just started. I've been like this since I was in school. My great-grandmother was a history teacher. My grandfather graduated top of the class, president of the class. He fought in the top sword in the Korean War. You don't get to come around and spew all kind of rhetoric that is all kinds of nasty about the history of this country and my life recklessly and not be checked. I'm not inferior to you. By no means necessary. I don't live in the street. I have a family, but I also understand the business exchange and the huge disadvantage of the slave descendants in the country throughout generational wealth progressing and other groups coming in, gaining capital on the land that the slaves were ran off. And reparations is due. And I understand that you owe me more than $14 trillion in reparations, and I'll say cut the check. Therefore, you can help correct the problems that you were a part of in exploiting a people that were treated unfairly and anchored wrongfully in terms of their abuse. And slavery, do you know what slavery was? For anybody to come in and make the wild accusations to a slave descendant, you haven't really looked at, you don't really look outside yourself, do you? Slavery was horrible. You didn't just use slaves for money. You used slaves to exploit to death. You fed my women babies to alligators for alligator bait during slavery because they were vulnerable and they were considered and constituted as 3/5 of a human. So you use them for work and labor till they died and squeezed them to death. And there's men out there who slave traders who use the male slave as a bed bug. Oh, it gets real. And then we got black men in suits and ties trying to be boule and trying to coincide with the white existence in terms of reparations. It's not about you being friends with them. This is a United States government issue. It don't have nothing to do with you personally unless you put your feelings in it. This is a serious matter. You got to understand that. And if you don't understand it, you soon will get it because we're coming. We're not stopping here. We're coming. We have the data. We have anchored ourselves in the data. We're swelling the ground. We understand what this is. This is business. This is just business, baby. So for you out there to be out there talking about black folks begging, one thing my grandmama told me is when you beg, folks hate to see you coming. So that's one thing we never did was begged anybody for anything. You come to my house, you'll know I'm not a beggar. But I'm tired of my people being behind the red tape wrongfully, and they don't even know they're being treated like this and being in the matrix and not knowing politics in terms of who they are as a unit or what has happened to them. My family graduated from Piney Woods Boarding School in Mississippi, high curricular school for blacks. Most people who graduate from there go to IT, Harvard University, Princeton. So how you gonna tell me I don't know my history because I speak of slavery? I don't care. I'm unapologetically a slave descendant. But I'm very respectful. And I be in the presence of white people that I love and dance with and sing with. But when it comes down to the truth, I'll tell it. No, I'm preaching now. I look at Leo, but I understand he flirts with the idea of trying to make people appeased. That's what he's doing. But he also remembers he's a descendant of slave. Leo Johnson. A lot of you. I can start naming you. And I will. Because it's time out for this mess. And a lot of you icons are in the same shape. Slavery was sanctioned by the United States government, and them Africans sold you from the African diasporas. So Pan-Africanism is a fantasy. We are the descendants of slaves in America. And we have got some form of freedom. And we're still economically enslaved until they cut the check. Thank you for joining me.